A passenger plane touches down at nearly 270 kilometers per hour. It weighs over 70 tons. And when its wheels hit the asphalt, it has less than a minute to stop. Because if it doesn't, the runway simply ends. And here's a question that almost no one asks. How do you stop something so big and so fast? Most people think the answer is simple. That the plane has enormous brakes, that the pilots press a pedal, and that the plane stops just like a car. But that's not what happens. In fact, the system that helps most to stop a plane isn't even in the wheels. And when you discover what really happens during those seconds after landing, you'll probably never look at a touchdown the same way again. In this video, you'll discover exactly what happens from the moment the wheels touch the tarmac until the plane comes to a complete stop. We'll look at the three systems working simultaneously, why improper braking can be more dangerous than not braking at all, and what the physical limits are that no engineering can ignore. And at the end, there's a fact about airplane brakes that will probably surprise you. Stay tuned until the end. The first answer people usually give is very simple. It must have enormous brakes. And yes, airplanes do have brakes, but if everything depended solely on those brakes, many landings would end very differently. Because there's something here that's hard to imagine. A commercial airplane can weigh more than 70 tons and land at speeds close to 270 kilometers per hour. The energy it has accumulated at that moment is gigantic. Too much to stop simply with brakes. And this is where the real problem arises. Stopping an airplane isn't about stopping the wheels. It's about eliminating a huge amount of energy in just a few seconds. That's why airplanes don't use a single braking system. They use several, and they all come into play in a matter of seconds. And the most surprising thing is that the most powerful braking system on an airplane isn't even in the wheels, it's in the engines. But to understand why, we first need to talk about what happens at the exact moment the plane touches down. The first system to activate is the least visible. Right at the moment of landing, even before the brakes touch anything, the aircraft deploys its spoilers. These are surfaces that rise above the wing like opening blinds, and their function isn't simply to brake. It's something more sophisticated. By rising, they disrupt the airflow over the wing. They destroy lift. This causes the aircraft to stop hovering over the runway, and all its weight is transferred to the wheels. Without lift, there's more pressure on the landing gear, and with more pressure, the brakes have more grip. It's like someone putting a hand on the roof of a car while braking. More weight on the wheels, more available friction. But here's something that almost no one knows about. If the spoilers fail or don't deploy correctly, the aircraft can be on the runway, with the brakes engaged, and still continue skidding. Because without sufficient weight on the wheels, the tires simply don't have grip. This is precisely what contributed to the crash of a flight in Warsaw in 1993. The spoilers didn't deploy upon touchdown. The plane had brakes, it had reverse thrust engines, but it had no weight on the wheels. And the runway ended before the plane came to a complete stop. The second system operates almost simultaneously: carbon brakes. Unlike the steel discs used in cars, modern aircraft use discs made of compressed carbon fiber. Carbon can withstand temperatures that would destroy any conventional steel. In emergency braking, the discs can reach over 1000 degrees Celsius. Metal would glow. Carbon simply absorbs it. And the system is designed to allow this to happen in a controlled manner, distributing the heat evenly across multiple discs per wheel. But even with carbon brakes, there is a limit. An aircraft braking with a full load in an emergency can melt the thermal fuses in its tires. These fuses are designed specifically for this purpose. When the temperature exceeds a certain threshold, the tires deflate in a controlled manner. Because a deflated tire is better than a tire that explodes. And this is where everything changes. Because up until now we've talked about the brakes you can see. But the most powerful system doesn't touch the wheels. It doesn't use friction. It uses the aircraft's own engines. Thrust reversers are one of the most spectacular systems in aviation and one of the most misunderstood. When an airplane lands, the engines remain running. They continue to generate thrust. What the thrust reversers do is redirect that thrust forward instead of backward. The engine doesn't change direction. What changes is the direction in which the exhaust air is expelled. Mechanical flaps divert the exhaust flow forward, creating a force that slows the airplane from the engines themselves. On a typical commercial flight, thrust reversers can significantly reduce the airplane's speed in the first few seconds of landing, when the speed is still high and the wheel brakes are less effective. But there's something surprising. The thrust reversers are not required to stop. Aircraft are certified to land with the thrust reversers deactivated. Why? Because the system also has its complexities. If a thrust reverser is activated asymmetrically, that is, if one is working and the other isn't, it can generate a tremendous lateral force. The aircraft would spin on the runway. That's why modern systems have safeguards that deactivate the reverser on the opposite side if they detect an asymmetry. The most surprising thing comes next. On long runways, under normal conditions, and without maximum load, many commercial aircraft land using the thrust reversers at minimum settings or even without activating them. The reason is economic. Thrust reversers consume fuel, and the wear they cause on the engines is real. So, on flights where the runway allows it, airlines prefer to brake using only the brake discs. But there is one situation where none of these systems is sufficient on its own, and it is the one that most challenges engineers: the wet runway. When there's water on the runway, the friction between the tires and the asphalt drops drastically. And this is where the anti-lock braking system, ABS, comes in. Yes, the same concept used in modern cars, but in aviation, the system is much more sophisticated. It's called an anti-lock braking system, and its function is to prevent the tires from locking up during braking. Because when a wheel locks up, it stops rotating. And if it doesn't rotate, it doesn't brake. It just drags. A tire that isn't rotating brakes less effectively than a tire that is rotating in a controlled manner. The system measures the rotational speed of each wheel in real time and adjusts the braking pressure individually to maintain optimal grip. It's the same logic that allows rally drivers to brake in corners so that the wheels never lock up completely. But in aviation, the margin for error is zero. And here's something almost no one imagines. For decades, the biggest problem in stopping an airplane wasn't the brakes, or the engines, or even the runway. It was knowing whether the plane would have enough space to stop. Until relatively recently, pilots relied on manual calculations to answer a critical question: can this plane stop before the runway ends? And the answer changed with every flight. Aircraft weight, landing speed, temperature, airport altitude, runway condition. All of these factors significantly alter the braking distance. And if the calculation was wrong, there was no second chance. That's exactly what happened in some of the most studied accidents in modern aviation. The brakes worked, the thrust reversers worked, but the runway ended before the plane could stop. Today, flight management systems perform these calculations in real time. The plane knows its weight, know the runway, know the weather conditions, and if something seems off, alert the pilots even before touchdown. But even with all that technology, there remains a limit that no engineering can eliminate: physics. A fully loaded commercial aircraft needs approximately 1,500 meters to come to a stop under normal conditions. That's why the runways of major airports are typically between 2,500 and 4,000 meters long. This margin isn't there for convenience. It exists because in aviation, a margin of error must always exist. So, what actually happens in those seconds between touch and stop? First, the spoilers destroy downforce and shift the weight onto the wheels. Almost immediately, the carbon brakes begin absorbing kinetic energy and converting it into heat. The reversers divert the motor's thrust forward to assist in those first few seconds. The anti-slip system regulates the pressure at each wheel to maintain maximum grip without locking up. And all of this happens in parallel, coordinated, in less than 30 seconds. Without a driver pressing a pedal, without a central system making decisions. Each component does its part at the precise moment. Braking an airplane isn't about braking harder, it's about managing energy. Because that plane you see gliding smoothly down the runway isn't simply stopping. It's transforming all the speed accumulated during hours of flight into heat, into resistance, into controlled forces working together for a few critical seconds. And the next time you are on a plane and you feel that instant when the wheels touch the runway, you'll know exactly what's happening beneath you. If the world of aviation has piqued your interest, I've included another video on screen for you to learn more.